How about Alexander for Steve? For the program, we're here to see Chuck Thompson Jr. and Chuck Thompson Sr. we're honoring today. Okay? But right now, we'll go with the Chuck Thompson Sr. story. There's Chuck Jr. and Chuck Sr. Now, back in 1947, the Dawson brothers had Danny Foster build them up, take the old So Long, make them a boat out of it called Miss Pepsi 5. And during that year, they won the Gold Cup and 5 other races to become the national champions. But the following year, the Dawsons went ahead and had a new boat built. But anyway, getting back to Chuck Thompson, here is his career back in the 30s and 40s. He raced the outboards here in the Detroit River. And there he is, running. And his main competition was from Garwood Jr., as a matter of fact. There he is. He raced from here down to Wyandotte, back and forth, outboard races along the Detroit River here. And there's the boat I was telling you about, the first Miss Pepsi. After they built the Peps, they built this one. Clell Perry, a former driver, built this boat for the Dawson brothers. And it wasn't very successful. It had one Allison in it, and it was a huge aluminum boat. And he drove it in 1948. And then Chuck Thompson came out of the outboards and was hired by the Dawsons to drive it in 1949. But he didn't have much luck with the boat either. It was just too big. In 1950, they had John Hacker design them, the Miss Pepsi, the famous U-99 Miss Pepsi. And they came out of the box, and they didn't qualify for the Gold Cup, but they went to the President's Cup in Washington, D.C., and took first place in their first year of racing. And Chuck Jr. was part of the crew back there when he was just a little teenager. There's the Dawsons and Harold Beardsley is a riding mechanic in the early days. And there's President Truman, the Dawson brothers, and Chuck, and he's presenting the President's Cup to Chuck Thompson. Look at that, the first one he won in 1950. And Chuck was gracious enough to admit that he hit a buoy in the Silver Cup race in 1950, and they gave a trophy to Danny Foster and the Such Crust after they disqualified Chuck. In 1952, they started off by winning the Maple Leaf Trophy race in Windsor, and then they followed up with the Detroit Memorial 2 weeks later. And they went out to Seattle for the Gold Cup and didn't do so well. They placed second after not finishing the second heat. But he came back in 51 and 52 to the Washington, D.C. and then Potomac and won the President's Cup 2 more times. Now there's a bunch of guys for you. Jack Schaefer, Horace Dodge, is it Joe Shana, George Simon, Chuck Thompson, Marv Hendricks in there, Chuck Jr. What a crew. Here's all the boats in downtown Detroit getting ready to go out to Seattle to try and win the Gold Cup back. In case some of you don't know, the Maple Leaf Trophies run right out here by Peach Island, on the other side of Peach Island here in Windsor. So it was a Detroit River race. That's a beautiful shot of the boat. That's in Seattle. Some people think that's Keens, but that was in the marina in Seattle. There's President Kennedy giving him the trophy in 1960. Well, what a shot. Look at that. That's history. In 52, the Dawson brothers retired the boat, Miss Pepsi, and they came back in 56 to try and win the Gold Cup back to keep in Detroit, but they weren't successful. So Earl Stilson has donated some money, so it'll be called from now on the Earl Stilson Pavilion over at the Dawson Museum on Belle Isle. That's where the Miss Pepsi is housed, in her own pavilion there. Now it's named after Earl Stilson. Is Earl here?
Probably working on his boat.
He's working on his boat.
Right. He's ready to put it in the water.
These are shots of the Miss Pepsi over at the Dawson Museum. If you want to take some time out today and drive over there to see it, it's a beautiful sight right there in its own glass building.
What year did you go over and help restore that thing?
And we restored it about 10
70s sometime?
Yeah, a long time ago. Here's some of Chuck's awards. There he is with Guy Lombardo, getting an award from the band leader Guy Lombardo, who had the Tempo 6 Gold Cup winner in 1946. And 53, Chuck went over to the Jack Schaefer Such Crust team, Schaefer's Bakery, and drove the big twin-engine Such Crust 3, which was just like the Pepsi, had 2 Allisons in it, but it wasn't quite the same boat, you know. They figured they'd build a slow-motion type boat, 3-point hydroplane, put 2 engines in it and see if it worked. But he placed second in a couple races, that's about it. Here he is with his Schaefer's t-shirt on. Anybody have any of those? Ken? And Chuck wasn't only a driver, he worked on the boats too. There he is working on the tail fin of the Such Crust. There, in 1954, Chuck Jr. designed this boat, the Short Circuit, U6. It had 2 seats, it was a little shorter boat, it had an Allison in it. And they raced here in the Detroit River and in St. Clair, Michigan. Had races around the area, in Buffalo, New York. And there's a nice picture of the Short Circuit. That's a very rare shot, that boat. That's a beautiful shot of it running. Chuck Jr. and Sr. driving there. Now 54, Jack Schaefer's bakery business is having trouble, so he sold his boats, Such Crust 5 and Such Crust 3, to Fred Van Lennep, who was a horse racer. He named Trot Along and Pace Along for the 54 Silver Cup. And Chuck was supposed to drive, but he never did. And here's a picture of the Miss Buffalo as Miss Detroit. There's the boat that Chuck bought from Guy Lombardo. It was the Tempo 7. He bought it and named it Short Circuit for a couple of years. And then he renamed it Miss Detroit. And he won a couple races in that boat. How many remember this boat? Yeah. And in 1961, Chuck challenged Canada for the Harmsworth Trophy, which they had won in 59. And he went up to Picton, Ontario with his Miss Detroit, all by himself, and tried to win the Harmsworth back. But the Allison engine, of course, was no match for the big Rolls-Royce Griffin inside them as Super Test 3. So Bob Hayward in the Super Test kept the trophy in Canada. There's Bob Hayward. There's a nice shot going down the Detroit River. Chuck Thompson, Fred Alter, and that's Bill Muncie in the Miss Thriftway over there. There's Lee Shaineth and Chuck running on the river. In 1962, Bill Harrah called from Reno and wanted to drive the Harrah's Tahoe Miss, which was the former Maverick, for 1962. He had Rush Slade drive the first part of the season, and Chuck drove the last few races. And there's the Harrah's crew. And in 63, they built a brand new Ted Jones design boat. There it is. Powered by Allison. It's a great big, well, there's a beautiful color shot of that boat. It only ran 1 year. And Chuck was its only driver. And they placed third in the Gold Cup here, and it's only the second race. And they went out to Seattle, and they won the race in Seattle with that boat. There's the 63 crew members. There they are. That's the back of the photo. That's the front of the photo. There's Chuck in the middle. Some rare stuff, Sandy. Later on, the boat was called Harrah's Club. Harrah's racing against the Smirnoff. They were running that off-stage Allison on that thing, weren't they? Yeah, that gets the pictures up in here. There's Chuck talking to Don Wilson, the hat on. In 1964, they retired that Bittersweet and Orange boat, and they built a brand new Les Staudiker boat. There's Bill Harrah there, owns Harrah's casinos in Reno and Lake Tahoe, all around the country now. And they built a new boat built by Staudiker. It was called the Gray Ghost because it was painted two-tone gray. Number U3, Harrah's Tahoe Miss. There's the crew. The guy in the suit is Harry Volpe. There's Harry with Les Staudiker when they built the boat. There's Chucky up there at Colin visiting Les Staudiker's shop, and there's the boat under construction behind him. And there it is, all finished. The boat behind it is the 63 boat, painted just like the 64 boat, but it never ran that way. Chuck won the Indiana Governor's Cup twice with this boat in the Spirit of Detroit race in '65. Here, right here in Detroit with this particular boat. And Chuck almost won his Gold Cup in '64. He won all 3 heats, and when he come out for the final heat, the engine was chugging. Somebody had stuck a rag in the carburetor and got stuck. And he chugged around behind the field until it got loose, and he tore off after the field, but he didn't make it. If he would have passed Don Wilson for 5th place, he would have won the Gold Cup. But he couldn't catch him. Just missed him at the finish line. That's a Notre Dame back there. And they're testing a radio there, see if they can hear it, but the engine was so loud, they had to abandon that, they couldn't hear him. Not like in today's turbine boats, you can hear the driver and the... There's a nice shot of the pits in Lake Tahoe. There's a Tahoe Miss, and there's Bernie Little's first Miss Budweiser there, D12. And his biggest competition in those days was Ron Musson and Miss Bardall. There they are. 2 of the greatest. Yeah, there's the turbocharging on the Allison engine. In the last race of '65 at San Diego, Tahoe Miss burst into flames in the first heat and burned right to the water line. So that was the end of that boat for that year. They took it back in the shop and rebuilt it after the fire. But Chuck ended up back in Detroit without a ride in '66, and he was hired by Lee Shana to drive the Smirnoff in the Gold Cup. There's one of the Smirnoff Gale Enterprises engines. And there he is running with Fred Alter in the Dixie Cola on the Detroit River, the '66 Gold Cup. And that's where he won 2 heats, and he barrel rolled in the third, started the 3rd heat in front of the Whittier Hotel. And he couldn't survive his injuries. So that says it all right there. There's some of the honors. There's the Honor Squadron from American Powerboat. And Chuck was inducted into the Unlimited Hydroplane Hall of Fame out in Seattle. And that's it, Chuck Thompson Sr. Here's Ray again. Ray? Thanks, Steve.